Testing, testing. These were working.
All right. Okay. Can you hear? Can you hear? No? Can you hear me in the back with this mic? No.
Testing.
Just going to give you all a few logistics as we get through day 2. So again, welcome to this space. Thank you for showing back up, being present. As you make your way through the day, we have a lot of opportunities to engage with each other. We have spaces outside to continue to network. Pin your pins on our mapping spaces. Engage with our post-it boards. You'll see some hexagons that have information. Walk around the hexagons. We have post-its. We want your information there. Thoughts, where you want to take these conversations next, how we want to shape our models and our summary papers.
Test 2 1. Test 2 1. Check 2 1. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 2. Check 1. Check 2.
Outside.
One, check 2.
And yeah, let us know if you need anything. If we have blue lanyards on, please reach out. So I'm going to have
Check 2. Check 1.
Lynn von Koch-Liebert
Check
kick
2.
us
Check
off
1.
this morning.
1 2. 1 2. Check 1. Check 2. Check 1. Check 1. Check 1. Check 2. Check 1. Check 2. It seems like this is going good.
Can I give him that mic?
Check 1.
Can I give him this mic?
I don't understand. It's coming through. Check 1. Check 2.
Incredible keynote this morning. How's that? No. Okay. I will do it from over here. Were they working over here?
But I'm not hearing in the room. Check 1, check 2. There we go. Okay. Run this down. Go grab a wireless. Give them that.
This is good. Checking 1. Checking 2. I'm so sorry. That one, yeah.
Okay. Testing, testing. Okay, excellent. Okay. Well, then we will jump right in. And do we have the director on Zoom? Were we Zoom friendly? Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. Will they bring her up? So excited for our keynote speaker this morning. Director Shalanda Baker is the director of the Office of Energy Justice and Equity and the Secretarial Advisor of Equity at the U.S. Department of Energy. And when I was thinking through the opening, the remarks, the introduction, I had the hardest time narrowing down what to share because she is an incredible state leader or federal leader, and we are so excited to have her speak with us today. So in her current role, she advises the Secretary on the impacts of energy policies, regulation, and the Department of Energy programs on minority communities, minority institutions, and specific segments of the U.S. population. Prior to her Senate confirmation, Director Baker served as the nation's first ever Deputy Director for Energy Justice. Before joining the Biden-Harris administration, she was Professor of Law, Public Policy, and Urban Affairs at Northeastern University. She has spent over a decade conducting research on the equity dimensions of the global transition away from fossil fuel energy to cleaner energy resources. She is the co-founder and former co-director of the Initiative for Energy Justice. She is a prolific writer, and her book, Revolutionary Power, An Activist Guide to the Energy Transition, argues that the technical terrain of energy policy should be the next domain to advance civil rights. And at the conclusion of her remarks, Director Baker will be taking questions from us, so please be thinking about what you may like to ask. And so, Director Baker, we are so excited to have you join us. Thank you, and welcome to the Catalyst Conference.
Thank you so much. I can't see anyone in the room. I see a blue screen, but I'm assuming you can hear me.
Not yet. We cannot hear you yet. Can we test again?
Okay,
We can hear you.
Okay, great. And whenever I'm able to see you, that would be great. But I can feel the energy even remotely. I want to thank the California Strategic Growth Council for inviting me to address all of you. I know it's early in the morning, it's day 2. I know that there are friends in the room, friends of friends in the room, so I'm really just delighted to be a part of the conversation. I also want to thank the Strategic Growth Council for all it does to prioritize justice and equity in your projects, from conception to development through execution and beyond. Again, I'm really sorry I can't be there today, but I know I'm in good company in terms of the folks who are in the room. And I'm really thrilled to share some of the work that we've been doing at the Department of Energy with this audience. So I know your conference theme is progress in place, from power building to project implementation. The organizers were kind enough to invite me to talk a little bit about sustaining community benefits, and I'm going to do that. I think your topic for this conference is really aligned with the work we've been doing over the last year or so at the department. So I know you've heard my bio, but I want to talk a little bit about how I show up in the work. And the work is leading the nation's clean energy transition to make sure it's just and equitable. Because that grounding, the grounding in my history and who I am, has informed every single day of my work at the Department of Energy, which I do on behalf of the nation's most marginalized and impacted communities. So for much of this nation's history, I think this audience knows this, but it's always worth repeating. Certain communities of color, tribal communities, rural communities, low-income communities, have been called on to bear the cost of the fossil fuel energy system. These communities also suffer from disproportionate rates of cancer, heart disease, asthma, and other ailments that sometimes go undocumented by public health officials and researchers. And we know some of these places: Appalachia, Central Valley, much of the Gulf South, certain swaths of tribal lands. And my own story is wrapped up in that tapestry of our nation's energy story. My father grew up in Port Arthur, Texas, which is the epicenter and the birthplace of today's fossil fuel industry. The air there is so toxic that even today, some families are told to shelter in place due to hazardous emissions. Throughout the region, families like mine have empty seats at family get-togethers. Almost anyone you ask there has someone in their family who's died too young from heart disease or cancer, or from some undiagnosed mysterious ailment. So this is environmental injustice. And I know it's something that many of you in the room know well. Environmental injustice stems from the structure and design of our nation's energy system. It stems from how we've decided to site or locate large energy infrastructure projects in this country. And we know from the data, from the research, from the literature, that African American households like mine are more likely to live in the shadows of fossil fuel generation, regardless of income. And so I'm implicated in this nation's history. I'm implicated in this nation's energy story. And so I have to bring in another part of my story, which also connects to the nation's development of the energy system. Excuse me. As a child, I actually remember my mother boiling water on the stove so we could have hot water for baths at night. Not every night, but it happened enough for me to know that this was a part, of my history, of my background. We also sometimes use the oven to heat the house, but just to, knock the chill out of the air. This was all happening in Texas, which is a state with some of the lowest energy costs in the country. My household was headed by a single mom who had a good job, government job, with a decent salary, but we were energy insecure, and we weren't alone. We know from data that we collect at the Department of Energy that energy insecurity, which is what we suffered from, affects 1/3 of American households. 1 out of every 3 families in this country struggles to keep the lights on, struggles to pay for energy. And often those households are making decisions between keeping their homes at a safe, healthy temperature versus buying food or medicine or paying other vital expenses. So we know that 1/3 of American households has some sort of energy insecurity. But when you zoom in on that statistic, you'll see that the burden is not spread evenly. Roughly half of Black households experiences energy insecurity, around 52.2%, and 47% of Latinx households experiences energy insecurity. And that inequality is baked into the structure and design of this nation's legacy energy system, the system of rate making, and arguably our system of regulating utilities creates that in disproportionate impact and that energy insecurity. And that's really unconscionable. So again, I'm implicated in this part of the nation's energy story, and these 2 data points from either side of my family tree have not only informed my technical approach to the energy transition, but they've also informed my embodied approach to the energy transition. I'll talk a little bit about that. But before I talk about the technical and the embodied, I want to talk a little bit about the office that I'm fortunate enough to lead. The Office of Energy Justice and Equity was formed under a different name in 1978. We just renamed the office a few months ago. I'm so proud of that name change. It signals where we are as a nation and where we are as a department. But almost 50 years ago, lawmakers realized that the energy system was already having disproportionately negative impacts on communities of color in this country. And they created an office to tackle those issues. So my office researches the social and environmental impacts of the energy system on people of color in this country and advises the Secretary of Energy on policy issues, on program design, and how to make sure our programs are actually positively impacting communities of color and reaching communities. So I've already shared some of the data collected by the Energy Information Administration on energy insecurity and well-known data on environmental injustice. We know this data. We have this data at the department. And here we're laser focused on ensuring that our transition away from fossil fuels to clean energy will be just and equitable and leaves no one behind. That's no community that's breathing toxic fumes, no single mom like mine struggling to pay her bills, and no one still living without the lights on in 2024 behind. Excuse me, recovering from a cold. 1 second. So justice is possible, but we have to stay focused on the ways in which inequality is insidious and our rules and processes unwittingly replicate injustice. So now let me turn to the technical tools we're utilizing. I'm so sorry. To make sure the transition is just and equitable. As a former professor, this is like one of my nightmares when you're speaking. And then you have a coughing fit. I'm going to try to power through here. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about some of the technical tools that we're utilizing at the Department of Energy. DOE Okay. DOE is better known for research and development than for learning about people and developing communities. But my office, the Office of Energy Justice and Equity, EJE, has some pretty unprecedented and powerful tools that we're using to rewire the entire department. So I'm certain that anyone in the audience today is familiar with Justice 40 and the historic Justice 40 initiative, which commits 40% of the overall benefits of federal spending on climate and clean energy toward work in overburdened and underserved communities. EJE, my office, leads that work for the Department of Energy. So through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, which we affectionately call Bill and IRA, DOE has a historic opportunity as an agency to support critical clean energy installations and supply chains that will help California and the rest of the country build a more secure, sustainable, resilient, and just energy economy. So how is this really relevant to California? I want to zoom in a little bit on the state. Between now and 2030, IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, will bring more than $21 billion of investment in large-scale clean power generation and storage to your state. And there are already plans in place for more than 8 gigawatts of new clean energy capacity statewide. Some of you may know what that means, but it really means that there is going to be enough to power more than 1.5 million homes with clean energy. Not only are we building capacity, but we're making energy less expensive. The clean energy investments from IRA tax credits will also contribute to the reduction of costs of clean energy technologies like solar and wind. For example, residential rooftop solar alone is expected to be around 60% cheaper by the year 2050. California is also in line to receive more than $80 million from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law to further build out its electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And we worked really hard on that program to make sure that it would reach the places that need it the most. So we are committed to ensuring that all of these projects create recognizable, tangible economic and environmental benefits for the communities and workers where they're located. So how are we doing that? Again, more on the technical tools. We know that in the past, outsiders that aim to solve communities' problems were told, actually came into troubled communities and told them what their problems were, instead of listening to the people having the trouble. The outsiders dictated the solutions instead of partnering to forge solutions. At DOE, we really believe that not only are those who are closest to the problem are also closest to the solutions, but those in communities have more will to find solutions. So over a year ago, my office created a novel framework in partnership with other leadership within the agency to cement communities' roles at the center of designing programs and plans that affect them, to ensure that justice and equity and the creation of high-quality jobs are the foundation of this clean energy transition. That framework is Community Benefits Plans, or CBPs. At their most basic level, CBPs are specific, actionable, and measurable plans that center equity and project development. So now, for the first time in DOE's history, we require every single applicant for DOE loans or for Bill or IRA funds to develop a community benefits plan. That plan must show a commitment to a set of 4 core policy priorities. First, engaging communities and labor. Second, investing in America's workforce through quality jobs. Third, advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility through recruitment and training and partnering with diverse suppliers. And fourth, implementing Justice 40. So an applicant's CBP counts for 20% of the overall score their application receives. So ultimately, it plays a huge role in determining who receives DOE funding and what their orientation to a community is. That's historic. And it's one of the key technical tools we're using to drive and institutionalize equity and justice at the department. So CBPs, they allow the department to ensure that the social, economic, and environmental effects of national energy programs, policies, and regulations do not have disproportionate negative impacts on communities of color, on overburdened populations. They also allow us to push for stakeholder engagement and other much needed benefits in places that we know have already and always been left behind when it comes to economic development. That means things like reducing energy burden, creating jobs, supercharging local and underrepresented businesses, but also increasing community resilience to storms, wildfires, and other climate-related events, or supporting local technical colleges and community colleges, as well as minority-serving institutions. But the only way CBPs can work is through transparency and regular engagement, including providing communities with the tools, resources, and information they need to participate in this moment of development. The only way CBPs can work is by ensuring that civil society, like the California Strategic Growth Council, and states and cities and communities hold us accountable as well. We have an unprecedented opportunity to create the blueprint for a clean energy transition that is inclusive, just, and equitable, and rooted in deep community engagement, but that also leads to meaningful benefits. Community benefits plans can mitigate project deployment risks, and I know many of you are in the project deployment space, by providing a platform for meaningful community engagement and allowing communities to tell project developers what benefits they want and need. And again, that makes you, the people who are attending this conference, a critical partner in our mission. So through Justice 40 and CBPs, the goal of my office, the goal of the Department of Energy, the goal of the Biden-Harris administration is to eliminate the energy burden and households disproportionately impacted by energy costs and the lack of reliable access to affordable, uninterrupted energy sources. It's also our goal to ensure that the energy transition does not place additional burdens on communities of color. It's our goal to place Black, Indigenous people of color, and low-income communities at the center of our energy transition. And it's also our goal to ensure that communities share in the incredible wealth that is going to be created by this energy transition. We recognize that we operate within myriad systems of that were not designed for equity. They were not designed for justice. They were not designed for freedom. But every day we still fight to make sure the systems do work for the people. And we know we can't do it alone. One office, indeed one department, or even one administration is not going to change the course of the climate crisis. It's people like you who work with community leaders, who work with residents, who are at the forefront of the change that is underway, and who will help us to etch justice and equity into this transition. Attending this conference knows or shows that you understand the importance of making place-based investments, that you understand the importance of tailoring solutions instead of instituting cookie-cutter plans. And as our partner, I've already deemed you our partner in this work, I ask you to consider the question that we're always asking ourselves at the department. How do we avoid repeating the mistakes of the past in this energy transition? How do we keep communities from being put into a position where it is disproportionately bearing the cost of the energy system while receiving so few of its benefits. Well, I think collectively, we have to stay vigilant. We have to continue to reckon with structural racism and structural inequality and the ways in which they are baked into our energy system, even when it's hard to do that, and even when it's unpopular to do that. If we do not continually reckon with injustice in our march to tackle climate change, we're going to actually embed injustice in the energy transition. But I know, because you're in the room, and by virtue of your attendance at the conference, you likely already get this. You likely already know that addressing climate change is not simply a technology problem. It's a power problem. It's a people problem. It's a resource problem. And it's a justice problem. I've argued in the past, and I continue to argue today, that our energy system is the next terrain to advance civil rights. We have historic tools at our disposal to advance a just and equitable energy transition, but our project cannot simply be about technology. Our project cannot simply be about research and development. It must always be about people. It must always be about the freedom and liberation of those upon whose back the current energy system was built. So justice is a possibility only if we all collectively stay vigilant. So that means you, that means me, that means everyone attending this conference, and all of us at the Department of Energy. We cannot let up, and our work is not done. So we can only avoid the mistakes of the past if we grapple directly with the structural problems that created energy insecurity and environmental injustice. We know that, again, we have to grapple with those things every single day, or else the new energy system is going to be built on top of a foundation of injustice. We know this is an extraordinary moment, and you and I, we're all a part of it. And so I want to end and wrap up my remarks by talking about how we embody energy justice at the department. I've talked about my background and how it informs how I come into the work. I've talked about the technical tools we have, like Justice 40, which is historic, and community benefits plans, which we have instituted at the department. But I want to talk about the embodiment of energy justice as well. So we were so proud of ourselves when we created the first ever workable framework for Justice 40. We led the federal family in that regard. We also gave ourselves a pat on the back when we created the community benefits plan framework. We know it sent shockwaves through the industry. But I knew that these technical tools would never be enough to cement the legacy of this moment. We, the agency, had to actually go to the places where energy justice and injustice were playing out. So my team organized the Energy Justice to the People Roadshow, where we took delegations of over 60 DOE colleagues, including leadership, the Secretary of Energy, as well as those who were in the weeds designing new programs and projects, to places like Brownsville, Texas, where the border is a fiction and families live and work on both sides of the US-Mexico dividing line, and where low-income, monolingual Spanish speakers in the US, on the US side, still lack access to basic infrastructure like running water and electricity. We took colleagues to Corpus Christi, Texas, where mainstream environmentalists and Black and Latinx residents have formed coalitions to understand and push back against next-generation clean energy technologies like direct air capture, hydrogen, and carbon capture and storage, because they don't see themselves in that. They don't see themselves in the future of the clean energy transition. They see these technologies as problematic to their natural landscape and don't believe that those technologies will bring material benefits to their communities. And so they don't want to house those technologies in their backyards. We also, as a DOE community, traveled to Port Arthur, Texas, and Lake Charles, Louisiana, as well as the river parishes outside of New Orleans, where Black and low-income white and Latinx communities have suffered for generations with the disproportionate harms of fossil fuels and petrochemical facilities. And now, because of the history in those places, because of the disproportionate siting of such facilities in their communities, they're now being asked to welcome technologies that will decarbonize those industries. So none of those communities actually see themselves in the clean energy future. But we desperately need to change that narrative. The only way to do that is by being in place. That's why your conference theme is so resonant for me. The only way to change the narrative is by going to the most distressed places in the country, the hardest places, the places where wounds are still raw and the pain of loss, of sickness still hang in the air. As policymakers, as advocates, as change agents who believe in the promise of a better world, a more just world, we must embody their experience. So that's the call. I would argue that this is required to bring everyone along in the global fight to tackle climate change. And so in closing, I need you to know that this is the hardest thing I've ever done. This job is the biggest challenge of my professional career, but I wouldn't be anywhere else. And I'm so glad to share this space with you today, to be in conversation about how we collectively can advance justice, freedom, and liberation through this unprecedented transformation of our nation's energy system. So help us make our technical tools better. Help us sharpen our approaches to community benefits. Help us make sure that when federal dollars reach your communities, you have a plan for equity, you have a plan for justice. But above all, embody justice. Go to the hardest places. Listen to and learn from the communities that don't see themselves in this transition. And then, as policymakers, as change agents, fight like hell to make sure they do. Thank you so much for giving me the time to share a little bit about what we've been doing. I really look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
All right. Thank you so much for that wonderful talk this morning. Again, I think it's affirming to remind us where we're at, the progress in place that we're thinking about, how do we sustain that, and doubling down on our commitments for community. The name change for your particular space, I think, really helps connect back to community so that our federal agencies are more relatable. So thank you for your discussion. We do have some opportunities for questions from our audience. So who in this space would like to do the first question? I see Bernadette in the back. If we can get a mic to Bernadette. It's working.
Test.
It was a minute ago.
Test.
Yeah.
Can she hear me?
Dr. Baker, can you hear the question?
Can you hear us?
Yes, it's a little
I can talk
underwater.
really loud,
It
but
sounds
I don't
slightly like it's underwater, but I think I got it.
Okay.
I'll try and speak really loud and clearly. So my name is Bernadette. Also coming out of
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't hear if there's a speaker.
Test.
Okay.
Testing.
It's working now. I can hear it. Yeah. Keep it.
Test.
If you want to say it, I can then repeat
testing, test.
it. Okay.
This is how we do it.
Here we go.
I just wanted to put my arm around you. Can you hear me okay now?
Better.
Wonderful,
Thank you.
Now I'm on stage. I did whatever I could to get on stage. So my name is Bernadette Austin, and I'm also a former academic and appreciate that background. But I'm currently the CEO of CivicWell. For over 40 years, we've been working with California communities to do really impactful work in the climate change space, including very much in the energy space, and we've been expanding nationally. So I was wondering if you could tell us some emerging trends or promising practices that we should consider as we're trying to approach this work in a way that really embraces the local assets and does things in a way that is culturally humble.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? I'm assuming you can.
We can hear you really well.
Okay, great. So just to repeat the question, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but emerging best practices on community engagement, energy development maybe as well? Is that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, so I love that your organization has been doing, this work for 40 years. We need more and more and more organizations that are committed to meeting communities where they are and expanding their capacity to participate in energy development. I know that I don't need to tell this audience that we're going to be asking communities to house large-scale energy projects, and that's, you know, from traditional utility-scale solar and wind projects to transmission to things like carbon capture and storage, carbon dioxide pipelines, all of those things at a scale and a speed that we've never done before. For them to be able to participate in those that process and in the project development, they have to have capacity to do so. So we have seen, I think, my ideal world is that we'll see a lot more community education on the technologies. We'll see a lot more kind of folks convening communities and industry together to talk about, again, the energy transition, to help push industry a little bit more to think about how they share benefits in the transition. I mean, as I mentioned at the outset, we're going to see a ton of wealth that is created, and industry has to see opportunities to share that wealth, either through businesses that are created, that are part of the supply chain, or the jobs that are created locally, or innovative ways to think about royalties, innovative ways to think about equity stakes in project design. But I think from the community benefits, or sorry, community-based organization standpoint, it's all about education. It's all about being on the ground, kind of sharing information about the technologies that are going to be required for the energy transition. So education, be the bridges that we need. We have some organizations that are stepping into that space, but we need more and more organizations to do so.
Thank you. More questions. Sean, I think let's maybe step up, Sean. In case this other mic doesn't work, you can join me on stage.
Hello. Can you hear me, Dr. Baker?
I can hear you.
Great, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, for your comments, and for all of your work, really driving the structural change that's required for energy justice. I'm Sean Kennedy with SGC. I have a question about time. So much of what you've talked about and the benefits of an energy transition, particularly financial benefits, accrue over the longer term. But many of the challenges that you've presented, energy poverty, high energy costs, energy reliability, are really challenges that need to be addressed today. So how can we bring those long-term benefits to the communities that need them right now? Thank you.
Sure. Well, so we're doing that. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think one of the challenges we face as an administration is letting folks know that we are on a little bit of a longer time horizon. The projects that we are funding today will not even be realized for until 5 or 10 years even from now. So as you mentioned, the true benefits won't accrue until much later. We have a lot of state-focused programs and household-focused programs that help us to move the needle. So through the bipartisan infrastructure law, we got an additional $3.5 billion for weatherization. It's still not enough, but we need to show proof of concept, and we need to be innovative in how we deploy that. We're already trying to do that. I mean, it's a program that has been in existence, for several decades, but we're trying to do everything we can to make sure the programs that actually can impact households right away with respect to things like energy burden are effective. So the weatherization program is one. We also have a rebates program that we're rolling out on a state-by-state basis. These are all of the projects that live within the State and Community Energy Programs Office. We're also piloting other types of, direct-to-community programs. Anyone who deals with DOE knows that normally we don't give money directly to communities, but we've been able to be innovative through things like prizes, where we're giving money directly to community members to sort of think about problem sets and think about the financial cost of solving those problems, and then helping to connect them to deeper pockets, either that be philanthropy or private sector partners that can help impact their households more rapidly. So even though we have this longer time horizon for large scale energy developments, we're also working at the smaller scale, the community scale, the household scale, the neighborhood scale, to move the needle more quickly. But you're absolutely right. a lot of these problems will take a while to solve in a systemic way. I think we will need proof of concept to help Congress understand what it is we do so that they can really get behind it and support it and know that, access to clean energy is not a partisan issue. Access to clean air and clean water is really not partisan. One last thing that I'll offer is that we also have the Inflation Reduction Act, which is basically providing incentives for more traditional, things like rooftop solar. Our office leads a program called the 48E program, which is a low-income community bonus adder for developers that are doing small-scale renewables like community solar, community wind, or rooftop in low-income communities. And that's one very quick way to get, things like energy burden reduction moving more quickly in the most distressed communities. So all of those are strategies. I mean, it's sort of, full speed ahead, all hands on deck from the small scale to the large scale. But great question, and it's one that I think about a lot.
Thank you for that. I think we may have maybe one or two questions. I'll go with you right here.
Hello, my name is Lucia and I'm from the city of San Luis Obispo, and as a recipient of a DOE Buildings Up Prize, I just want to say thank you so much for that innovative way of funding local communities. I think we can all take examples in the grant programs we administrate from your leadership. And my question is around kind of grounding a lot of the concepts that you've talked about today in practice. And just as someone who sees so many amazing community-oriented energy projects going in across the country, could you inspire us with a story or a tangible project that makes you really excited about the future?
Oh my gosh, yes. Put me on the spot here, but I have a good one. So I mentioned that we had the Energy Justice to the People Roadshow. And the thinking there was that I knew certain communities were going to be asked to house things like direct air capture, things like carbon dioxide pipelines, and we needed to get there first to really understand some of the concerns. So in November, we were actually in the river parishes, which is traditionally in some circles known as Cancer Alley. And, we were at a church, which was a multi-denomination, multiracial church in one of the river parish communities. And it was a huge church, but they were the ones who were hosting us for the day. And the first thing we did, so I was there with the Secretary and, other colleagues from DOE. The first thing we did was inaugurate what they call the Community Lighthouse Project. And so if anyone knows this geography, they know that it's not just the hurricanes that make the lights go out. It's the, storms that come on a regular basis. I mean, these are communities that are really on the front lines of climate change. I think one major storm, which was unnamed, left the power out for 3 weeks in those communities. And we're talking about folks who have kind of, health ailments, a lot of diabetes and things like that, where folks really need to rely on home electronic devices. And so the Lighthouse Project was a very simple project at that church, rooftop solar and storage. And it was meant to be a beacon for that community and for members to come and charge devices, be able to plug in their cell phones, let folks know they're all right, have access to life-saving energy and day-to-day energy during a major outage in those communities. And so there's a little organization, I wish I could remember the name of it, but they're based in Louisiana, and their goal is to create all of these lighthouses, these beacons of hope and light for the communities throughout Louisiana and on the coastline and in the front, on the front lines of climate change. So that's an example of a small scale, relatively affordable. I think it was, I asked the cost, I think it was under 100, maybe 100K. I don't want to misquote, but it was fairly small in terms of the amount of money that they needed to do the project. But you can replicate that at scale, right? And so there's an organization really committed to that, and it requires everyone, right? A multiracial, multi-class kind of coalition to get some of those projects off the ground. We at the Department of Energy are also trying to fund those small-scale projects. Our Grid Deployment Office is providing resources through the GRIP program for regions to begin to think about innovations like that one as well. I hope that was inspirational. It was inspirational to me in being on the ground and seeing, people just so proud of that lighthouse.
That is beautiful. Let's give it up for Director Baker.
Thank you so much. Again, wish I could be there. Thanks for bearing with me.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I know you have a hard stop right now this afternoon. We look forward to talking with you and engaging with you further. Thank you again.
Thank you. Have a good conference. Bye-bye.
All right. I know we have a lot more questions that folks didn't get a chance to ask, so please engage with us afterwards, and we can run stuff up through our partners and see how we can get this through summaries and then also create more engagement for each other. So we're going to go on to our next panel this morning. So let's welcome up actually the panelists, and I'll introduce you as you come up. So we're going to go through sustaining community benefits. I will be moderating this morning. Please welcome to the stage, we have Gayle Miller. Gayle Miller is the Senior Advisor of Infrastructure and Clean Energy and Finance to the Governor Gavin Newsom. We have Ian Gabriel, who is the Director of Data, Policy, and Planning at Lift to Rise. Lift to Rise is a nonprofit collective impact organization that brings together community and institutional leaders to collaborate and solve the underlying causes of poverty and inequities. And then we have Zach Liu, Coalition Director for the California Green New Deal Coalition, which is a grassroots and environmental justice-led statewide alliance of over 80 community, labor, climate, and racial justice organizations. Please give us a warm welcome. Are you okay if I stand?
Of course.
Okay, just in case our mic goes out, I'll be able to project a little bit better. So we heard yesterday in kind of our position here of really thinking about the progress in place, how we're thinking about power building, sustaining power building, and how we grounded ourselves in the conversations. We heard from Director Baker today about really moving through the strategies and building up those opportunities to connect back to communities, finding new solutions that are tried and true with community, bringing them up to the federal level, bringing them up to the state level, and looking at partnerships, right? Furthering our partnerships to really catalyze these dollars that are coming in. And then again, how do we do this so that we are really ensuring these benefits actually land with community, they relate to community? And so for today, sustaining community benefits, I think this is that kind of nexus in our conversation practice where today we're looking at how do we continue to stand up and do this work together for the long term? And so for my first question, it's going to be for Gayle. Gayle, California has really been thinking about this for quite some time. We've strategized across the last couple of decades around our investments in climate, sustainability, and we're leading the nation in this work, leading the nation in how we think about those benefits for community and mitigating climate harm. But we also know this is not enough. Right? It hasn't been enough for a long time. And so we're thinking about, again, how do we strategize and leverage these funds? And so with our current landscape right now, what are you seeing as the opportunities, the silver linings that can move us closer to our goals? And then what are the opportunities that we can create during this opportunity or this deficit right now?
Great. So I don't think this is working. Can folks hear me if I talk loud enough? Yeah, in the back too?
I think
Hi. Well, first let me just recognize, yeah, it is working now?
push it close.
The closer it gets, the better it is? Yeah. There, wow, okay. Well, I look forward to your questions too. So I'm going to try it like you are. Yeah. I think this will work a lot better. So I do want to recognize sort of the environment we're in and really recognize each of you for the work that you're doing, because I do think that what you're saying is so important. This has never been a task for the state alone, for the federal government alone. I was super inspired by Dr. Baker. This is
decades in the making. We have a history of racist infrastructure in California and the United States. We have not spent enough time thinking of collaboration, listening to communities. So in a lot of ways, we're building on top of a really, really complicated system, and each of us have to be really intentional of how we make it better. And I do just momentarily want to really recognize some leaders in the room that I've gotten an opportunity to work with, because like Dr. Baker said, this opportunity to be nimble and innovative only comes when we're deliberate. And so Lynn von Koch-Liebert, I know you've heard from her, but in terms of taking this idea of innovation and catalytic financing and the opportunity, it's phenomenal to work with you and see the ways that you're really creating these partnerships that are so important. Dan Carroll, I don't know if you're still here, from Milken, has spent a career on public finance, making sure that public finance does not mean state alone, that there is this huge opportunity for all of us to participate. From US DOE, Arnab is here, and you have to shout out your name because I'm going to be really embarrassed. Paul, I can't recognize enough, I'm going to get you later, how much this catalytic work of the Loan Program Office is doing. The Strategic Growth Council alone, they will be announcing a virtual power plant program that can be used really to transform communities. Those of you in this room that haven't looked at virtual power plants, demand pricing in terms of making sure that the lights stay on, and Sean Kennedy too, so much work on this program specifically, making sure the lights stay on, making sure that we are creating affordable opportunities for energy, and then what it means really for affordable housing. If we can create an opportunity for affordable housing that includes an opportunity for clean power, that actually says, what about this demand response and how can we bring it down? Those are the types of examples that I think are so phenomenally transformative, and really encourage all of you, if you haven't already, to learn about that and do more with it. I do really want to shout out a report that was released on Monday coming here. It was the Climate Policy Initiative, a partnership with the iBank and SGC. Talks about that we're about 26% of the way there, which is in a lot of ways great. We have a 26% annual growth rate from 2019 to 2022. There is absolutely more work to do. I do think you've probably heard a lot about the budget. It's a $48.3 billion investment over 7 years. That's 89% of where we were, so deficit, yes, opportunity, absolutely. And so what the call to action of this report, and really sitting in this room, is, and I love how you call it a silver lining and an opportunity. In addition to, like Dr. Baker just talked to us about, really seeing our communities, listening to our communities, and building for our communities, which California, I think one of the best examples of that is in Imperial County, in terms of, as we see this lithium gold rush, as they call it, making sure that we really respect the community there with the progress, with the opportunity, and with this hopefully gold rush where that wealth is really shared, that we find other opportunities and we don't only look to government. Because as we grow opportunities with impact investors, with nonprofits, with communities, we see what that opportunity really is and how the community can grow from the ground up. And that's one of the most important things we can do as a state. I sincerely look forward to hearing your questions and how we can better introduce this idea of catalytic funding. And I'll just give you, someone in the audience, a softball. One of the questions is, what can we do to make this a little bit easier for our communities? Technical assistance. We all know how incredibly complicated these applications are. So how can we collaborate? If Elena was here, she would talk about a collaboration with the Irvine Foundation. But how can we really collaborate with philanthropy and your communities to make sure that we're making these programs accessible? So a really long answer, but just grateful for the opportunity to learn from all of you. Really grateful for the work and innovation that we're seeing that really does say there's these capital stacks are what make us able to realize these goals. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, next question, Zach. We're changing it up just a little bit, if that's okay. What challenges are you seeing and hearing from community right now? And so we have this opportunity to take advantage, if you will, on climate infrastructure funding. What are you hearing? What's the landscape that you're in right now?
Sure, thanks. Ooh, and that's working. So I'm actually going to pick up a little bit on what Gayle was just saying at the end. And when we're asked about challenges in this moment, I think a lot of people know what I'm going to say. It's been said throughout yesterday and will be continued today, which is to talk about capacity challenges, right? But I think I want to go into that a little bit deeper, because I think we use this word capacity, but it actually kind of refers to a whole host of different interconnected issues that community and local government and the state government is facing right now. And that has to do with, yes, the challenge of applying to really kind of complex grant applications. It has to do with actually having the ability to have shovel-ready deemed projects. It has to do with having communities that are ready to actually receive that funding and having the ability to administer and report on fairly complex requirements that a lot of these grant applications come with. And I think the issue with those capacity challenges is not just that we're leaving money on the table, which I think we definitely are in many cases, but it's also just a critical way that issues of equity and justice creep in. Because I think even if in some ways we're all kind of struggling to meet this moment and we face those capacity challenges at every level, I've talked to folks yesterday at state agencies, at local agencies, and in community-based organizations that are all kind of facing similar challenges. But we also know that there are some that are much, much farther behind than others. And so I think, we can think of that capacity gap through the lens of community, of geography, of income, of race, of citizenship status. It shows up in a lot of different ways. But I think part of the risk is that we leave those communities further behind when we're just reacting to this as a single goal of getting the money as fast as possible, which just inherently favors the status quo and continues to benefit groups that already have resources. So I think from there, I kind of want to highlight something that I see as an opportunity that kind of connects to this capacity challenge. And it really is related to the framework of the Justice 40 initiative that Shalanda Baker was just talking about, and is really critical to this idea of wealth building and sustaining community benefits. Specifically related to the Inflation Reduction Act, a lot of people have, I think rightly so, emphasized the significance of the tax credits. These are the so-called bottomless mimosas of the IRA because they are uncapped. And I think not everyone knows this, but the sort of price tag for the IRA is very much an estimate, and it's based in large part due to the estimated uptake of those tax credits. So hypothetically, we could go much, much beyond that and draw down much, much more funding if we have groups that have the capacity to actually do that. And so I think thinking about those tax credits often sort of lends itself to thinking about public-private partnerships. How can we help the private sector get access to those tax credits so that we can maximize the benefits? But I think one of the less discussed, but I think personally potentially more transformative aspects of the IRA is something called the direct pay or elective pay provision, and that allows tax-exempt entities to actually access the full benefits of those tax credits in ways that have never been possible before. So this includes state and local government, includes tribes, includes nonprofit organizations. And so, for the first time, they have the same access to those bottomless mimosas as everyone else. And I think this just opens up so many possibilities for the things that we've been talking about in this conference. The potential for tribal energy sovereignty, for community wealth building through direct community and public ownership of projects, for resilience centers to install and own clean energy and storage systems. And I think, again, the challenge with that, again, is capacity, and it kind of shows up in this particular way where public and nonprofit entities, because they haven't had access to this for so long, aren't sort of equipped and don't have the technical know-how to actually own, develop, and operate these projects. So they're in many ways sort of decades behind private entities that have sort of built that expertise over time. And I'm not saying that there's no role for the private sector. Obviously, there really is, and we need to think about what the state's role and kind of the civic partnership means to try to access that. But I do think in terms of something that we should consider in terms of prioritizing is how the state and other sort of entities that are working on this can actually allocate limited resources to support public and community ownership of projects. These are the kinds of projects that I think can really have huge potential for sustaining the community benefits that we're talking about, because they are literally owned by the community. They stay there forever. The benefits continually are reaped, and don't just kind of provide residual benefits of a project that's owned by a private entity. So I think this really moves us closer to thinking about clean energy and climate investments as a public good, and we'd really encourage folks to think about what the opportunities that we can actually open up in this moment.
Yes. And I think we're hearing a lot of ways to kind of create an opportunity to draw down multi-layer opportunities of funding, right? So no longer are we just drawing down one source of transportation dollars to do a project, to do housing, to do energy. We're finding those solutions, how energy can really support housing, can support communities, can support energy resilience. And so I love that opportunity, and it's a new space for the federal government, also a new space for states and philanthropy to really partner and see how we can really create these whole projects and whole funding opportunities. So I think, Ian, again, with your team, how are you all facilitating affordable housing outcomes with this opportunity and some of the challenges, not only to create and go beyond where we're at, but again, thinking about that ownership, the community power, and the power building that we want to see, but also what are some of the other ways to access these resources?
Great. Can folks hear me? Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. I just wanted to give a shout out to the folks at SGC and OPR and Milken for putting on a great conference, and thanks for having me. I'm going to do it this way. Also, I'm proud to be here to represent the perspective of the Inland Empire. There's a few of us here, so shout out to the Inland Empire as well. So my name's Ian Gabriel. I'm the Director of Data Policy and Planning at Lift to Rise. We're a place-based nonprofit organization that is leading and convening a group of 70-plus cross-sector stakeholders around regional housing affordability strategy in the Coachella Valley. So we have a 10-year goal that we set in 2018 of reducing rent burden in the Coachella Valley through the production of 10,000 units of affordable housing by 2028. So we're about halfway through our goal, making great progress. And I just wanted to share 2 examples of the work that we've been doing in Riverside County in public-private partnership that I think are coming from the affordable housing perspective, but have some potentially, hopefully, inspirational power for folks working in the energy and clean energy field and other sectors as well. And in these examples, we were able to sort of build sustained community benefits out of what could have been ostensibly sort of one-time state or federal investments, but through involving community members throughout the process have been able to build those and transform them into long-term sustainable community benefits. So the first is around the collaboration that I mentioned. So we call it the Housing Collaborative Action Network, or the Housing CAN. It's a cross-sector partnership that Lift to Rise, my organization, is the backbone nonprofit. We have the lead institutional partner is the County of Riverside, specifically one of the supervisorial districts, District 4, which completely encompasses the Coachella Valley, and then the Department of Housing and Workforce Solutions. And then all 9 of the local Coachella Valley cities, so including elected officials and city staffers from various city departments, plus a robust resident leadership table, which operates from within the CAN and represents sort of a cross-section of residents from across the Coachella Valley. And then affordable housing developers, CDFIs, banks, CBOs. So it's a really broad coalition of different organizations and agencies, and all of us are organized around a shared priority, result of this 10,000 unit goal. And just to back up a little bit, so we came out of back in 2018, this group kind of decided to organize around housing affordability, around affordable housing, because of a large-scale community needs assessment that we conducted in partnership with USC's Price Center for Social Innovation under the leadership of Dr. Gary Painter, who some of you may know. And that year-long process, we spoke to over 1,200 community residents, and just time and time again, housing affordability, rent burden, housing cost burden came up as sort of the key foundational issue that was impacting everybody's ability essentially to thrive in their community. So that was sort of the impetus coming from community to organize around this issue specifically. So together now the Housing Can has developed this 10-year goal, and we have this multi-pronged policy pipeline, investment, and resident engagement strategy to get us there. And one of the things I wanted to point out that came out of this is the Coachella Valley Housing Catalyst Fund. So this is a revolving loan fund, and this gets back to the leveraging the investments and creating sustained community benefit. But the Catalyst Fund is a revolving loan fund that Lift to Rise and the county built together, where we raise money. So right now we've had contributions direct from the state budget via our local assembly member Eduardo Garcia, and then an allocation of county ARPA funds as well. And those funds are matched dollar for dollar by two CDFIs that participate in the fund as well. So Low Income Investment Fund and RCAC match each dollar that we raise. And what we're able to do with that money is essentially create flexible, low-interest loan products that can go out to community prioritized affordable housing projects. And those are one-time investments from the state and the county via the federal government, but the money comes back and we're able to recycle the money back into new projects once the loan terms finish. And another aspect of it is that there's an oversight body on the fund called the Community Advisory Committee, which is a set of community members that assess all of the loans and sort of the direction of the fund against a set of priorities that they've created from a community perspective. So each project that is funded through the loan has to meet a set of community prioritized criteria. And then just a quick second example, because we had this public-private partnership already established with the county starting in 2018, when COVID hit in 2020, they turned to us, and recognizing that we're a nonprofit and we're able to act a lot quicker than the county, they asked us to design and then implement the emergency rental assistance program for the entire county of Riverside. So we partnered with United Way and the county to design and then implement what ultimately became a $300 million program that kept, I think, about 120,000 folks housed over 2.5 years. And it could have ended there. Like, it could have been a one-time investment where we, ran out of money and the program ended. But what we were able to do was mobilize hundreds of program participants, continue to engage them, to now form this network of local residents who are showing up to Planning Commission and City Council meetings to advocate on behalf of affordable housing projects in their communities. So this is something that the Lift to Rise resident engagement team has really been working on, and taking this one-time investment and not just having it end after 2 years, but really engaging the program participants who are low-income renters, the same target population as our sort of long-term affordable housing efforts, and really mobilize them in support of these projects moving forward. So those are just two examples locally that we've been working on that I think could have some applicability elsewhere.
Thank you. All right, let's go back to Zach. Let's go a little bit further in our housing spaces. And so California Green New Deal Coalition has been a strong proponent of the concept of green social housing. Can you briefly explain this concept and how you see green social housing as a means for addressing California's housing and climate challenges? What are some benefits that we can look at going beyond green social housing that this model can provide for us?
Sure. And I think anyone who knows things about the concept of green social housing, it's going to be hard to do briefly. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we think about it from the Green New Deal Coalition. And this is a campaign that came from our members, and I think first and foremost, this is a recognition that our communities are facing these twin crises of the housing crisis and the climate crisis. And I think increasingly we're seeing the ways that those are fueling each other. We're seeing catastrophic wildfires, flooding, sea level rise, all threatening to destroy homes and displace communities. And at the same time, we know that our homes are contributing to our carbon emissions, and we need to figure out how to decarbonize them. I think that sort of leads to the next piece, which is that if we're not intentional about the way we do this, by trying to address one crisis, we really risk exacerbating the other. I think the residential building decarbonization work is a really good example of that. That's something that's come up a number of times during this conference, including, I think, during the first panel yesterday. If we aren't thinking about equity in the design of these programs, I think number one, we really risk the benefits of those going to primarily homeowners who have incentives that are kind of aligned with the benefits that decarbonization can bring. And secondly, if we do target rental housing, we really, and don't have tenant protections in place, we really risk decarbonization investments leading to displacement through rising rents, through potential evictions. And I think this kind of brings to mind something that Lynn said at the beginning of the conference yesterday that really resonated with me, which is the goal, I think, of this conference of Progress in Place, of how we create better neighborhoods and same neighbors. I think the building decarb and risk that comes with that is such a good example of what potentially happens if we don't put those protections in place. And so as we think about green social housing as a campaign, this is really orienting us toward a model of housing that is permanently affordable. And I think this really connects to, again, this theme of sustaining community benefits in the context of housing, what permanent affordability actually means. And it's a call for communities to actually own the land, to put the land back in the hands of communities, supporting the growing movement of community land trusts in the state. It's a call to return the land to indigenous and native stewardship through land back. It's a call for investments in housing and new upgrades to promote health, sustainability, and community resilience. And I think, you know, how do we do all those things? That sounds really hard. That sounds ambitious. And I think, you know, that's good. This moment calls for us to envision alternative futures. And that doesn't necessarily mean that those are naive. There's opportunities out there for us to pursue these visions, and I think one of the biggest challenges right now is to not become prisoners of the moment, where the horizon of possibility is essentially limited by the things we can see right in front of us. So, you know, a lot of this is a commitment to building the political and social will to start moving forward and see what kind of futures we can imagine as we begin to take those initial steps. This campaign for us and the Green New Deal Coalition is very much in those early stages. We're taking those initial steps. And so I would just say if you're interested in learning more, if you have ideas, if you have deep concerns and questions, please come find me at some point later today and talk, because we're definitely trying to grow this movement and this push for alternative visions of what we can do in housing in the state.
Thank you. Okay. I think all three of you talked about how we're meeting in this moment, how we can really think about effective wealth building, utilizing all of the opportunities and funding opportunities ahead of us. So in an effort to really provide some more time for questions from our audience, I'm going to give you all one last question and then we'll move there. What does it look like 5 to 10 years from now? Where are you seeing us? How did the story go?
I think that no one person should answer. Can you all still hear me? I don't think this is working. No?
Yeah.
Oh, some of you can. Okay. Yeah. So the answer, if I were to, like in one sentence, and there's so many different ways to answer this question, but in terms, I completely agree that this is beyond anything any of us can see right now, because the question really is to all of you and these opportunities that you're going to create. But in 10 years, we have created a sustainable, equitable infrastructure system writ large, so everything from broadband to housing to clean energy, that has understood the communities in every part of California. So that will look really different in Riverside than it does in Oakland, than it does in Siskiyou County. So if I could, there is the potential in California, even with the budget deficit, to invest $180 billion, create 400,000 jobs. None of us, those numbers are so large that none of us truly understand what that can mean and what our promise to deliver is. The other piece that is so important is that we just don't repeat the mistakes of the past. So there are certain things that we truly, truly know we've done wrong in the past, and that we have to consciously correct those. And most importantly, I'll say, when you see a mistake, work to fix it. So if this is actually the collaborative and catalytic effort that we're all hoping for, that the mistakes will be corrected in collaboration. So I can't emphasize enough that part of the task for all of you is how will you work with us when you see something going wrong, that we're actually going to fix it together rather than kind of creating more polarization and concern in our community, which we could go on and on about, but that's my big concern, is that the collaboration stops when something goes wrong. That's the time that collaboration continues. So my vision is this equitable, clean future across all of infrastructure that has met with mistakes and challenges and addressed them together.
That was very well said, and both of my panelists are very well spoken about these ideas, so I appreciate being up here with them. I would say from the perspective of our work in the Coachella Valley, our vision is one in which in 10 years from now we've arrived at a place where there's a lot more trust of communities to be able to deploy the resources in the way that makes sense to them. And so it kind of goes in line with what Gayle had said. It's going to look a lot different in the Coachella Valley than it will in other parts of the state. And obviously the state is there to provide the tools and some of the resources, but there needs to be a level of trust in the communities themselves to be able to actually effectively deploy the resources for what they know would be useful. I also envision a future in the Coachella Valley where there is more of an explicit connection between climate and housing. Those things are obviously connected. I don't have to tell you all in the audience, and I think in the desert region where we are, we're sort of at the front line of a lot of these key climate issues. We have a lot of toxic runoff from the Salton Sea affecting the eastern Coachella Valley communities, extreme heat. We have water issues, and then all of that is exacerbated by economic inequality. So I think right now we're doing a great job of integrating creative climate solutions, heat mitigation solutions within the housing developments that are going up. But I think there needs to be more of an explicit connection when we're talking locally about those things. And so in the future that I envision, the state and organizations like SGC, I think, can help facilitate that conversation and make that connection more explicit at the local level. So that's the vision I have for our work in the future. Thanks.
Yeah. I'll just be quick. I think what I hope to see is that this moment essentially lays the foundation for a just transition that we then, the next time another big investment comes in 5 to 10 years, we're even better prepared to handle that. I think we heard yesterday a little bit about, I think, some of the impacts of a Transformative Climate Communities grant in Fresno, kind of starting to lay that foundation of civic partnership that then allowed them to, when other additional future became available, they were able to go even further. We're really well prepared for that moment. I think those are the kind of seeds we're trying to plant right now with all the different ways that we're struggling with capacity. Hopefully this is starting to build and foster those partnerships and connections, and then ultimately creating this virtuous cycle where we see success, we see effective projects being deployed, we see benefits to communities, that people start to see themselves in that, and start growing a movement so that we can have a much bigger investment the next time around, and then we're even better prepared to handle that when it comes. So I think really, as Shalanda Baker was talking about, it is about deploying projects and new technologies, but really it's about sort of building power together and building community connection so that we can continue to do more and more in the future.
I mean, I think that is exciting to me for many, many ways, right? We have the space to really bring in these dollars, create that wealth, support our communities in creating that wealth. So for me, SGC, and I think our state government, I'm seeing really awesome community resilience centers that are owned by community, that are led by community, that are creating opportunities for jobs, food, that are really tapping into our VPPs and seeing how the virtual power plants are going to be expanding, creating more ownership, creating more wealth building in community, and having that wealth actually be sustained. So it's really exciting to hear all of you mention where we're going to be at in 5 years, 10 years. And I'm seeing how the state, how the feds and philanthropy have sustained technical assistance in a way that is really meaningful, in a way that is, again, community-led, driven, and owned, tribal-led, driven, and owned technical assistance that is going to work, right? No longer are we going to be in this space where we're trying to build capacity. It's sustaining that capacity. It's seeing how we're going into additional project implementations, getting to project completion, and then going after additional funds to secure opportunities for increased mobility, land access, and again, sustaining that energy infrastructure. Thank you to our panelists. Let's have some questions from the audience. Any questions that are coming up? Anything that folks want to comment on? I know folks have some. Here we go. Okay, so the question is, how are we thinking about capacity? How are we supporting AVOs, all volunteer organizations? What does that fiscal sponsorship look like when we're bringing down the funds? Does anybody want to take that question?
I think can you still hear me? A couple things. One, if you have, there has to be sort of a beginning in terms of this fiscal sponsorship. So there's at least three ways in which this state in Imperial County and Humboldt County, some in Riverside and Oakland, I do think this connection with other organizations is really important, just because of the way fiscal sponsorship works. Sean Kennedy can talk a lot about this virtual power plant program. So if you have to sort of find that connective tissue, so it can be, you go to like a VPP organization like Ohm Connect, there's mechanism, and that goes into these affordable housing developments and actually helps you do this demand response. So you take the saved energy from other places through a storage system and put it in an affordable housing development, for example. So for the virtual power plant program at SGC, for example, you would work with a virtual power plant provider. They would then go to the loan program office at USDOE. They would get the loan and then come to the SGC for a grant. This is all within the context of supporting potentially an all-volunteer organization. And then, so now they have potentially the loan from the loan program office, a grant from SGC, and a plan with you, the community, to develop this entire system. But I do think that all volunteer organizations have to find the connective tissue somewhere is super, super important. So it's really, really difficult to just wait for something to come, unfortunately. And eventually, as we really lift up our system, we can get there. But for now, that's what your challenge and goal is to find that connective tissue. So connect with anyone from the state here today, so you really see how to get connected into these various programs. I'm happy to help, but there's so many people here today that can do exactly that. But that would be the fiscal agent question is almost as difficult as the capacity building question, the technical assistance. So those are the three challenges. So if I were to give you all a challenge, it's find someone here today that can help you address all three of those questions, because those are the ways that you're kind of going to have your entire system, and you're not going to focus on a single thing. So you should have a contact for state programs. You should have a contact for the U.S. LPO DOE program, and then really find a contact that can help you with capacity building and technical assistance. And with those three things and incredible few, because an all-volunteer organization is absolutely not easy. That's the way that I think you start building.
Thank you. All right.
Over the past 2 days, everybody has been talking about capacity building. And he's, as he so beautifully said earlier, capacity building seems to be a general term for a set of interconnected issues and needs. And one important part of that capacity building has been finding people in the community, in the areas where the projects take place, informing them that these opportunities are here, mobilizing them to get involved, because if you have individual buy-in at the community level, that's part of capacity building. And this may seem an odd question, but I would like to know what each of you think about using social good platforms and social media platforms in a much more effective way to communicate the fact that these opportunities for economic justice now and, capacity building are available.
So the question is really kind of thinking about how we shape capacity building through opportunities for communication, expanding it through social platforms, social media opportunities. Is there anyone here that would like to comment?
Does this work? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great question. I think, so at Lift to Rise, we do have a strategic communications department that is actively doing a lot of that work. So I think a big part of the affordable housing movement is around communications, narrative building. That's a huge part of it because it really affects both how local elected officials think about it, but also just the public in general, especially folks that may be opposed to it in the first place. And I think there's some great opportunities through organizations like the Casey Foundation, which is a philanthropy based in Baltimore, the Center for Community Investment, and the Case Made, which is an organization that is devoted to building strategic communications capacity within organizations around affordable housing issues. And we've worked with all three of those organizations over the years to help us in general with leadership development internally, capacity building, but with emphasis on strategic communications. So I would encourage folks to look into those three organizations they host like trainings and cohorts devoted to that exact topic. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I think I would just add, I think we need to use all of the channels we have available. Ultimately, I think it's about meeting people where they're at. And so people talked about this yesterday on the panel. Sometimes that means having community events where you're actually making it about joy and music and food, and then using that as an opportunity to bring people into questions about planning and engagement with some of these funding opportunities that are available or programs. It also means things like digital communications or digital organizing for folks that use that, and that's the way that they access information. I think it is a challenge, again, I think someone talked about this yesterday, where it's because there's all these different programs available and sort of funding opportunities, a lot of different groups and the same people are being asked to come to 10 different meetings so that they can talk about different opportunities. That's a really big challenge. I think working with community organizations that actually have trust is a really good way to start. And trying to figure out ways, if you can kind of bring people together around kind of a combination of these different issues and not just trying to do one-offs with people on specific funding opportunities. But this is a situation where we're at, where a lot of people either don't have trust, or they've participated before and they didn't see anything come of it, or they're just overworked and tired and don't have that, the opportunity to come out to events that are held in the middle of the afternoon on a weekday. So I think we have to try to figure out those ways to meet people where they're at, and if it includes using digital tools and social media, I think that's a great way to try to reach some folks. But I think we also need to be knocking on doors and going into parks and going into people's homes and actually talking to folks wherever we can.
And the only thing I'd add, I agree with all of that. I'd also add that we have more education and more opportunity in terms of the tax credit and the adders with Justice 40. So when and how we work with like an impact investing community and If you are getting the tax credit, you get more of the tax credit when you're working in a disadvantaged community, when you're working with frontline communities. So the education around that is so vital, and I don't know how we do a better job on that. Maybe it's through social media, maybe it's through other types of ambassadors that are talking to folks about what it means to be the initial fiscal agent and partners in communities.
I think it's all of our responsibility to connect with each other and share information that, again, relates to community where they're at. So having multiple opportunities with language, the type of language, the type of delivery, I think is really key when we're trying to message any of this critical information. I will shout out, we do have Executive Director from OCPSC, Community Partners and Strategic Communication, Yumi Sarah. Your team has been doing this and thinking about opportunities for how do we strategize, how do we create trusted messengers when we have critical things that are coming down from the state, from the federal government. How do we resource communities to actually be that trusted messenger and go into communities differently? So again, I think it's an all hands on deck when we were trying to really strategize, share information, and make sure that our people and communities that are most impacted are really having that information that's relatable, that's understandable, and creating a space for them to actually create that change and deliver it in a way that makes sense for maybe their children or their older adults. So that is the end of this panel. I want to thank our panelists. Thank you both. Thank you all. So we are going to do something really quickly as we transition over to our breakout sessions. We're going to do one more photo here in this room. If we can have folks, again, try to squish in, if you will, to the middle. Please indulge us as we take one more day 2 photo, and then we'll be transitioning out to our breakout sessions.